wasn't on. Check 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that loud enough in the hall? Okay. Wow. Hello, dear Dharma friends. How nice of you to come. How sensible. This venerable old drum was my first drum. I have one now that's much more of an instrument. But anyway, I want to tell you about the story of this wolf. Sometimes, really often, actually, really bad things happen to people here on the earth. A woman, this is 25 or 30 years ago, a woman came to me who had been tortured as a child. And she had developed an internal world that she could go off to and be safe. I mean, we all do this kind of dissociation in some ways, but I know there was a fair amount of fighting among my parents in my childhood, and when people fight, when people are in conflict, I have such a strong pull to go off into the ozone somewhere. It's been quite a learning over the years. I did couples therapy as a therapist for several years, and when couples would start fighting, I had trouble being in the room. It's like, whoa, come back and be conscious. So I've done a lot of work with that. But anyway, she wanted to. She didn't have any money, and she wanted to give me something in exchange for our many meetings. And she said that on the way into her trance state, her other world, there were 3 wolves. And she asked one of them if he would pose for her. And she painted this. It took her 30 hours, she said. And I'll leave it here afterwards. If you take a look at it, every hair is accurate. I mean, this is really a fine painting, a natural painting. And the particularly cool thing about it is that when I'm really grooving in the poetry, I get a whiff of dog breath. Wolf breath. And the wolf happens to be my spirit animal. I don't know that I know who. Oh, I do. No, this is an anonymous. I don't know from whom it came. I need to maximize that so I can see the whole thing. There we go. It's a little poem called Betrayal and Disappointment. As we grow up, we learn that even the one person that wasn't supposed to ever let you down probably will. You will have your heart broken probably more than once, and it's harder every time. You'll break hearts too, so remember how it felt when yours was broken. You'll fight with your best friend. You'll blame a new love for things the old one did. You'll cry because time is passing too fast, and you'll eventually lose someone you really love. So take too many pictures, laugh too much, love like you've never been hurt. Every 60 seconds you spend upset is a minute of happiness you'll never get back. Don't be afraid your life will end. Be afraid it will never begin. As we grow up, we learn that even the one person that wasn't supposed to ever let you down probably will. You'll have your heart broken probably more than once, and it's harder every time. You'll break hearts too. So remember how it felt when yours was broken. You'll fight with your best friend. You'll blame a new love for things an old one did. You'll cry because time is passing too fast, and you'll eventually lose someone you love. So take too many pictures. Laugh too much. Love like you've never been hurt. Every 60 seconds you spend upset is a minute of happiness you'll never get back. Don't be afraid that your life will end. Be afraid that it will never begin. I never used to get cold. I grew up in Montreal. At 75, I get chilly. It's kind of weird. So here we are, my friends. This moment right here. It's a foggy morning. We meet here in a long lineage of practice, starting with the Buddha who was a real human being, an ordinary human being, just like us, who experienced suffering in his life and who decided he had to find out some solution to that. Birth, sickness, old age, decay, death. Having experiences you don't want to have, not having experiences you do want to have, being with people you don't want to be with, and not being with the beloved. So he went on a quest, and in the end, his quest bore fruit. And he realized some very important things I'll be talking about today in my Dharma talk. And he set out for 40-some years, 42 years or so. He traveled all around North India teaching people in order to provide them with the same experience he had had. He was very successful. And then he died, like everyone dies, ordinary people die. And teacher to student transmission has happened for 130 to 150 generations through Lady Sayadaw U Ba Khin, Ruth Denison, through me, and now to the next generations of teachers, and to you. So we're part of something really big. And whatever it is that pulled you here this morning, I mean, what is it? Why did you come here this morning? There's so many other things you could do. But there's some pull from within, some call from within, which is really powerful. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And I would say that arises, that's a great good fortune. Imagine being drawn to this. Well, let me ask, anybody here for the first time today? 1, 2, 3, 4 people. Wow. So I'd love to know, why are you here? I'm not asking you to express that here, but I know that when I went on my first retreat in India back in 1971, it was desperation. My girlfriend of some years, we traveled overland from Europe, and she told me in a hotel in Chandigarh, India, that she was not going to marry me and live happily ever after when we came home, but in fact, she was going to go off on her own, which threw me into codependent collapse, freaked out. And as we pulled away from the border in the Khyber Pass between Afghanistan and Pakistan, a border guard reached in through the window and gave me about, I don't know, about that much hashish. And I used that every day for 3 months, several times a day. So desperate. But I kept meeting these young people who were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I'd asked them what they'd been doing, and they said they'd been on a meditation retreat. And I thought that was the most stupid thing in the world. Why would you go and sit in a monastery when you have India or Nepal? But I got quite desperate, and I went on that first retreat, and that changed everything. Because I discovered that there's a way to have a mind which is much calmer, which suffers less, and which doesn't have to distract itself all the time, which can actually be present in the middle of everything, anything. So we're here with a noble purpose, which is to face the reality of human suffering. And in so doing, we also become much kinder people, much more loving. We can actually have greater integrity in our relationships because we can tolerate discomfort. So, for whatever reasons you think you came, and whatever reasons way deep inside you came, let's stop, let's sit comfortably upright. If your eyes are open, please notice that you're seeing. Seeing. And then if you feel safe enough to let your eyes close, let them close and notice how seeing winks out. One of the things we can notice is that there's a body sitting here, somebody. And every breath has a beginning. Every breath has a rising to fullness, and then a decline, and then a vanishing. And one of the first meditative instructions the Buddha offered, the strategy, is to be mindful. To be mindful of in-breathing and out-breathing. To notice the quality of the breath. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long, sometimes it's deep, shallow. And there's something happening here that we don't often notice. Not only is there a body and the sensations that come as a body, there's awareness. And we can't look or know awareness directly, but it's clearly here because there's knowing of in-breathing and out-breathing. And of course, there's much more happening here than just sitting and breathing. The mind produces thoughts, memories, plans, emotions. And just as awareness can notice in-breathing and out-breathing, it can also take as an object thoughts, worries, plans, obsessions. And this very noticing this awakening is the royal road to freedom. And this practice of heart mindfulness is done with kindness, compassion. There's a common and very destructive misunderstanding, which is that the goal of practice is to stop. Oops. The watch is listening. The idea is that I'm going to practice real hard and then stop my mind from wandering. It does stop, but not through any coercion. It stops because it just runs out of energy. When there's no resistance to it and no clinging to it, it just winds down. And so with great gentleness, let's be aware of breathing. Perhaps also aware of the body where it touches the cushion of the chair, the floor. Maybe alive in the sensations in the hands and fingers. Maybe aware of the face as sensations. So sometimes awareness abides, rests in breathing all the way from the beginning to the middle to the end of a breath. Sometimes it's lost in thought. The mind is lost in thought, and then mindfulness magically springs into being. The Buddha discovered that mindfulness is cultivable in the same way concentration is, and equanimity and love and compassion, curiosity. So let's sit for a while, come home to breathing. Notice the process of awakening every time it happens. As we follow along this path that so many millions of people have gone on before. In addition to breathing and the wandering mind, we can observe some of the large features of the mind itself. Is this a mind which is easily concentrated, or is it rather dispersed? Is the hindrance of restlessness and agitation present, or is the mind calm and concentrated, or somewhere in between, or oscillating between the two? Is this a mind filled with wanting, craving, desiring something, or wanting something not, disliking? Is it a mind that's wide awake, or is it sleepy, dull? Is it a mind filled with faith or doubt, perhaps doubt? Not sure if this is working, or if you want to do it, or maybe the Buddha was wrong. All of these and much more are worthy objects of observation. There's a very powerful teaching by one of the great Thai masters of the last century, Ajahn Chah. It's a life-changing teaching. He said, whenever you want to bring your practice into perfect balance, remember this: This moment is like this. It's notably not. I have to improve this moment. This moment will be okay when it's like that. This moment is like this. Happy, sad, content, distressed, feeling safe, feeling fearful, deeply concentrated or restless as could be. This moment is like this. And please let's now, in coming to an end of this period of sitting practice, take a moment to reaffirm contact with the feet and the legs. Temperature, warm, cool. The buttocks pressing in the chair, the back, the sacrum. The life in the fingers and hands and arms. The profound reality of in-breathing and out-breathing. the neck and the jaw and the cheeks and the lips and the nose and the eyes and the forehead. It's all alive, isn't it? And please let us bring awareness into the eyes, into the aliveness of eyes, not some idea of them, but and maybe allow the eyeballs to roll around a little bit, maybe make circles inside there. They're so well protected in their little orbit. And now noticing the intention, the plan to let the eyes open, which is in mind. And then operationalizing that plan to let them open, to notice the effort it takes to peel them upwards. And then seeing happens. How do you do that? It's no effort at all, is it? When the conditions are correct, there's seeing. And if the eye is functional, and maybe if you have your glasses on, objects get pretty clear, maybe remarkably clear. Seeing. And this seeing in this way is part of the next step, which is to take mindfulness into daily life, where every activity is known in this simple, mindful way. Seeing. Life is so much more interesting when we're awake to it. I remember years ago, I heard Jack Kornfield say something like, mindfulness is like the signs that you see in Vegas and Reno. You must be present to win. If we're going to be here in our lives, we must be present. Otherwise, we're robots. Well, I have a little handful of announcements before I hand it over to Jim to do some Qigong. This is a Burmese monk's bowl. It was my bowl when I was there briefly as a monk way back in 1979. My teacher, Tangpulu Sayadaw, sent it with me. I think maybe he knew we were going to do this adventure. But I think of it as a symbol for the practice of dana, which is the practice of generosity, in which we do this. We take something and we say, here, we can share. And also, if I'm clinging to this, it also helps me uncurl my fingers and offer. So PIMC exists completely on dana. And what it means is that if you are inspired by the teachings, if they help you, then you can reflect, how can I support this? I can support it by doing volunteer activities. Doug is our new volunteer coordinator. And please see him if you want to be engaged in that way. But you can also put apples, oranges, dollar bills, checks in here. There's also a wood one back there. And you can also contribute online, and monthly contributions are really a help. one particular thing about monthly contributions is they remember to donate even when you forget. So, and it's a marvelous practice. If you don't want to meditate, just practice being generous. And that'll change your life too, a lot. Take a look online at these offerings. Doug Pullen is doing an introduction to mindfulness class starting soon, this month. I am going to be away. By this time next week, I will be in Costa Rica. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be, of course, tourism, but I'm anticipating what happened last year. We did this, and I had several hours a day that I got to sit, and it was really a wonderful retreat. And I'm much looking forward to that. I think Candle Summers will be teaching next Sunday, and then somebody else the following Sunday. The other teachers also will be teaching in the morning meditations during this time. You have a Qigong day coming up, the 18th. And I believe it's the 6th of March is the beginning of a 13-session class that I'm offering that I'm really looking forward to. We'll be using the book Mindfulness by Joseph Goldstein, which is a classic of our time. The Satipatthana Sutra, the Sutra, the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, is the map in a way. It's where the Buddha laid out, this is how you train the mind. And it's very orderly. Joseph gave a total of 43 talks over the course of 3 years to people who were at the Forest Refuge in Massachusetts at the Insight Meditation Society. There were people who were there for at least 3 months, many of them for 6 months or a year. So he was talking to very mature students. And he gave these 43 talks in order on the Satipatthana Sutra. And then he wrote a book from it. And the book follows, you can listen to the talk and read the chapter, and you can see how he condensed it down. I had the opportunity to speak with him because Ruth Dennison, my teacher, was giving IMS a beautiful bust, bronze bust of the Buddha. And I talked to him and I said, you know, I just taught a class using your book, and I want to thank you. It is such a fine book. And he said, I'm glad you like it. It almost killed me. But it's elegant. And so each week there would be readings, which I recommend you do it in advance. And then each person in the class, if they wish, will have a member of my teacher training group, it's happening right now, to communicate with once a week about the teaching and how your practice is going. So it's really going to be quite something, I think. And so if you're interested in mindfulness, this is a way to really get the big picture. It's so much more than mindfulness of breathing. It's seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. It's liking, disliking. It's mind expansive, contracted, and so on. It's very how to practice in daily life, the 32 parts of the body, and so on. So that's your invitation. You can look online and join if you want. Sunday nights, first and third Sundays of the month, Candle Summers does her mindfulness and metta class at 6:30, and every Sunday night is I love their name, the BQN group, the Be Queer Now group, which is a very intimate group and sort of peer-led and very welcoming. Do you want to say anything about volunteering? If you do, come up here, okay? This is Doug. Nice shirt, by the way.
Thank you. I am Not Doug Pullen. I'm the other Doug. Sometimes people want to know how to tell us apart because we're the same age and the same height, but he has dark hair and he knows what he's talking about. That's the main difference. There are a lot of volunteer opportunities around here. How many people have volunteered with KIMC? It looks like
Nice.
a large percentage. Thank you very much. And a couple of things that we have every Sunday are our greeters. Is there a greeter today at the door? There, yay, Charlene. And then we have hospitality at noon, right after we're done here, back here with coffee and tea and cookies.
Flowers too.
And flowers
Luba
is
brought the
another
flowers.
volunteer every day. Thank you. Did you bring flowers today? Okay, people to do that as well. Yes, and there are opportunities for gardening. If you come on gardening days, an army comes and descends, and it's really fun. And pizza, and there's cleaning. And Robert has things he comes up with and needs volunteers. So you can sign up in the back there. You could always ask me. And a lot of them, you know, you don't have to sign up for every Sunday to do hospitality, the first Sunday of the month, whatever. You could just do it once and try it, or you could ask me about it and we'll show you today. And Paul wants attention.
Also, if anybody wants to start giving podcast.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. Okay, that's all. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, good sir. Any other announcement I forgot? The days are getting longer. I have students in the Yukon. The days go up as high as -20 now. It's spring. It's changing. That's actually an exaggeration. It's warmer than that. Not always. But. Well, that being the case, let me just say this. Jim will now do some mindful movement in his inimitable style. And then after that, I think I'm going to ask you if you have any questions today. And then after that, if you go through these doors, there's tea and coffee, and there's a most remarkable group of people that appear there. And they're folks that are really worthy of talking with. Let me say one more thing about that. I didn't mention the refuges today. Refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The refuge in being awake, refuge in the teachings and in what one discovers with them, but also the community that there's a true story about Chogyam Trungpa, Tibetan teacher, long dead now, that when Buddhism was just taking root, when insight meditation was taking root in the West, and he was starting his Shambhala Center in Colorado, he entered a room with 200 or 300 young people. And the first thing he said was, if this is your first encounter with the Dharma, I recommend you leave now. Because once you start, you have to go the whole way. You can't, once you put in motion mindfulness, it's, as Ruth Denison put it so beautifully, Dalink, once you have the Dharma, you can no longer get away with yourself. And so you start noticing your mind, what your mind is doing, what your emotions are doing. And then it becomes more and more urgent. And then it becomes necessary to have friends who are doing the same thing. Because meditators get quite weird. Somebody says something hurtful, and they wind up saying, wow, I'm experiencing hurt now. And oh, look at that, there's angry thoughts. And people who aren't meditating think you've gone nuts. because you're starting to look inwardly and attend to. And it is true that meditation, if one member of a couple begins to meditate and they meditate significantly, it destabilizes the couple. Because the old ways of going numb together stop working. And it can be a wonderful thing to destabilize a couple, because it might mean, oh, let's move on together. Let's get closer together. Let's deal with these things we never talk about. So it's a huge intervention. Even 5 minutes a day, believe it or not, 5 minutes a day of stopping and breathing will really change your life. And it's very helpful to have some friends to talk to about. That's the invitation. Mr. Dalton, would you like to take the helm?
All right. So here we are, standing on 2 feet with approximately the same engagement with each foot, with the earth. You can feel the connection, the pressure. We have all kinds of names for sensations, but the feet feel like this when we're standing. Much different than when we were sitting. We've got this uprightness, and the whole nervous system is more vigilant and aware, especially if you're 77 years old and you come upstairs. You got to pay attention. The idea is that we hope to bring mindfulness of the body into everything we do. And so let's start with changing the weight. We do that all day long. We move in one direction, and then all the weight's on one leg. We reach over for something over here, and there's engagement here, and something that feels completely different on the other side. You feel that? Yeah. I have a teacher that wants to be aware of every differentiation in the body. Well, not every, but 6 different ones. Up is different than down. Left is different than right. I'm gesturing for them. Left is different from right. And front is different from back. And so what he will do is stand for a few minutes. We're not going to do, we only have a few minutes, but he'll stand for 5 or 10 minutes with his arms out and just being aware of how symmetry feels. This arm is pretty similar to this arm. This leg is pretty similar to that leg. The front is very different from the back, because the front has toes. You can glide forward and the toes will help maintain an upright position. If you glide too far back, there's going to be trouble. So you're not totally symmetrical front and back, but then he'll take his toes and point them to the corner and then sink into the back leg, because now he's got a back and a front leg, and the legs are different than the arms. One arm engages like it's going to reach out and greet someone, shake hands, and the other hand just going to relax. So if you take the left foot and compare it to the right foot, the right hand, compare it to the right foot, the right hand compared to the left hand, he goes back and forth and back and forth. The idea is that your body, your intelligence in your body can differentiate on those three planes, front, back, up, down, left, right, all at the same time. You can be engaged and relaxed, engaged and relaxed, engaged and relaxed. And then switch. Symmetry. How do you know it's symmetrical? Well, the mind just flashes through, comparing left knee, left shoulder, right knee. It takes a long time for me to say those words, but awareness just scans and says, oh yeah, that's pretty much the same. And then shift, sink into the back leg, reach out with the other hand. Ordinarily, I don't reach out to shake hands with my left hand, but I do that when I reach for a glass of water. And then the other hand is just resting. And there's no reason for there to be any tension in that resting hand. It's not needed for the engagement that's going to happen. We're anchored on the back leg in order to step forward and get a glass of water. But while we're intending it, when we're thinking about doing it, the front foot doesn't have to work. All the weight's in the back. So whenever you can get a chance to be kind and generous to one part of your body and say, relax, you're not needed right now. Then we come back. Symmetry, balance. That's another act of generosity. We don't have to defend against anything. We don't have to figure out how to get up the stairs. We don't have to figure out how to get around that chair or that table or whatever. You're standing and resting. Give yourself a gift. And if you've been listening to the news too much, your whole nervous system has started to squinch. You know what that squinch feels like? There's so much happening across the planet that's so disturbing to this nervous system. But it just gets pounded all the time. I have to make a schedule. We're not going to have any devices here. This is blocked out. No devices connecting me with all that stuff. And instead, I'm going to get rid of the squinch. I'm going to lift and sink to differentiate between low and high, lower and higher. But I'm going to do it symmetrically for a while, because it's a gift to the body to work out the tension, and doing it with other people who want to be in that same state of relaxation and flow. Our hearts start beating together. Our lungs start working together, breathing in and breathing out. We don't have to put any effort into coordinating the breath. It just sort of happens because it's an easy way of resetting the nervous system. But then to dance with life, I'm reading a book called Dancing with Life. And I realized that's what brought me into Qigong 15 years ago. It's a way of letting your body dance with life. Reach across and let one hand look at the earth and let the other hand look back at you. And then just move across. And we call this cloud hands, because you switch. Once you switch, this hand is looking towards you, this hand is looking towards the earth. And it's like a cloud moving across the sky with the shadow moving with it. There's harmony, there's balance and composure and poise. When the sun is shining on the cloud, it's shining around the edge of the shadow. If this, then that. We find this, if we slow down, we find this subtle harmony in life, the life of the planet. And if we move with that same kind of flavor, it resets our poor beleaguered nervous system. I can't do much about the craziness in the world, but I can create a little harmony right here. And I find that there's a whole bunch of people doing the same thing. And that belonging together in a gesture is so rare in our society. We're so individualized. Getting together and doing it together, resetting, bringing relaxation and awareness. This is not symmetrical. There's a lot of engagement in this foot because of the weight of these hands. These hands feel like this, and that has an impact on that foot. The hands feel like this, and it has an impact on this foot. The intelligence of the body brings all that together into harmony over and over and over all day long, and we miss the show. So we stop every once in a while, come back to the center, open, feel the difference in the attitude when the rib cage is open. And for a minute, just scrunch everything in, that squinching, that, another news story. Oh my God. But we have the ability to offset from that with mindful movement. What a gift. And the Buddha talked about 4 foundations of mindfulness. The first was mindfulness of the body. So we create these dances to move with other people towards more relaxation and harmony and self-awareness. But it's really us awareness. It's not limited to this person here. It's we are moving together. We don't see that very often in this culture. Okay, so Robert said that, are there other announcements? I just thought of something. We're meeting here for Qigong on the 18th of February. Ordinarily, that would set me up for the 18th of March, a month later. But a month later, Candle Summers is going to be here with a woman from another Sangha who does mindful movement and does it with bells and music and different kinds of dancing that I do. So mark that on your calendar. Hold that date. The 18th, there's going to be a visitor here with Candle to do a workshop. So I'm going to move mine to the 11th. So 18th is Qigong in February, 11th is Qigong in March. Thank you very much. See you then.
Paul. Oh. The heck? Test 1, 2. Is that a little louder? Yeah. Hello. Oh, there we are. Is that going to be too loud now? 1, 2, 3, 4. My apologies to you folks on Zoom. I was just saying that the Buddha image up there is in itself not sacred. It's what it stands for. Now it seems a little echoey in here. Is it okay for you? Okay. Okay. It might be good also, or you might find it interesting to know that tabletop, which is behind the Buddha, was given to us by Ruth on one of my trips down there. We brought it back tied to the roof of a van. We had the ropes going through the car. And when Ruth gave it to me, Ruth was very, very deeply involved in the center wouldn't exist without her, actually, for a variety of reasons, including incredible financial support. But when she gave us that, she said to me, Dalink, around this table sat Aldous Huxley, and she named off 6 or 7 of the very famous people. And she said, and they were on acid. And I was their mama. Their home, Ruth and Henry's home, was the passing through point for many, many of the teachers from Asia who came and stayed with them and then went on to teach elsewhere in the country. Ooh, are you doing that or did it do it? Is it now? Oh, well, don't worry about it. I'll stay seated. No problem. I think that's a great positioning now. Strange to have a world. How many people? We have 47 people in and maybe about the same number here in the room. So I want to do something I haven't done for a long time, which is say, what are your questions? Would you like to ask a question? If you do, I will do my best to provide a response. And if you do want to ask a question, please raise your hand and I'm going to ask KB, would you do the honors? Take this to somebody and if nobody does, we can just be nice and quiet. That'd be all right too. Nope, there we go. And when you get the microphone, you'll need to turn it on, KB. When you get the microphone, also please say your name. And let's not follow. Let's leave the camera on me. Not on the bottom. It's a loud click.
My name's Beth Hanneman. And I don't have a question, but I just have to share. I'm very moved because Robert's been talking about Ruth. And I've just read her book recently, and I think everybody should read it. And I'm returning it today. And it tells the stories that Robert has just talked about. And we just have to love her. There's also on YouTube, I Googled her name. There's many things on there about her, and there is kind of a long movie. It's very slow moving, so you can have it on and be doing other things, but it's just an incredible story about her and the people at Dharma-Dana that she helped, this less fortunate people, and how she healed a woman that with mental illness that lived there, and the woman was truly a gift, and I'm so grateful that she came into Robert's life and made this happen here. So, and thank you, Robert.
Something most people, how would anybody know? Joseph Goldstein is really notable teacher of our time. We're using his book in the class. was central in the Insight Meditation Society, and Jack founded the Spirit Rock. They're kind of like the behemoths of Insight Meditation. And on several occasions, they sent their students to Ruth, and they would come and they'd live with her. They'd live there on the property, and she would take she would really take them under her wing. And I was there one time, and a woman came to the door, and she was a very difficult person, this woman. And Ruth talked with her, and then she said, "It is now time for you to go." and I was concerned because, you know, I was a trained social worker and had lots of psychotherapy training. And I was wondering, what is Ruth doing with this person, you know? And I said, "What are you doing? You know, what do you see here?" And she didn't have the diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorders, but she had deep insight. And she had a whole treatment plan for this person. She was really quite brilliant. And that's a really worthy book to read. She had a very, very challenging, difficult life. She was a beautiful young girl, 18 or 19 at the end of the war, and she was captured by the Russians and used very, very badly. And she never did the PTSD work that it would have been good if she had. So there were some blind spots and some difficulties she experienced. Some of you probably wouldn't know this either, but there's a disorder called depersonalization derealization disorder, in which she had learned, much like the young woman who painted this, she learned how to go out of her body. And she was in Baja with her husband, Henry. And she was projecting her consciousness out of her body and being in the waves. And then when she came back to come back in, she couldn't get in. It just wouldn't work. And it was hell. And she could be medicated, Thorazine, I mean, really heavy medication, and she would stop suffering. But other than that, she was just in this agony of disorientation and not herself. And it turned out that Henry took her, they went together around the world, meeting around Asia mostly, meeting the great masters and seeing could Western medicine had shot its bolt. And they were with Yasutani Roshi in Japan. And he told her, "Just relax." And she said, "I can't." And he said, "Why not? If I relax, I'll die." And he screamed at her, "Then die." And she snapped in. And she had three more, to my knowledge, three more instances of that shattering out in her life. And yeah. But I think was part of her genius, that she really understood. It's sometimes hard to believe she's gone, but of course she is. It's been 7 years now, I think, 6 or 7. But she came to Portland, one of the first times she came, and I invited all my friends, everybody I knew. My teacher's going to teach. And it was Dharma Rain Zen Center, what's now Portland Friends of the Dhamma. And I think she may have been here a day, or no, maybe I picked her up at the plane. I can't remember. She always stayed in a little hotel out on Lake Oswego where she had a view. But anyway, she had 2 events happen. One was she fell asleep in the car on the freeway between LA and Palm Springs and just coasted over to no damage, but she was very disturbed by that. And also Henry had, his dementia was progressing at that point, and he had, they left a pot on the stove, a pan, and they came back to the house and the house was on fire. And she, when I told her that this talk was happening, I said, I think there'll be about 100 people. And I was like, oh no. And she hated microphones. She was frightened of microphones. And so we came in, and the entrance there, you come upstairs, she came in and was ahead of me, and she looked into the room and she just about fell back. It's like, no. And she said, I can't do this. And I said, well, I'm sure you can, because Ruth would talk. She'd talk forever when she got going. And she got out there and she went to her spot. And then she started off by saying, we had a fire. And then she talked about the fire. And then she said, I fell asleep driving. She told that story. And then she fell silent a little while. And then she said, did I tell you we had a fire? And then she told that story again. And then I fell asleep driving. And the third time in, I was just freaking out. What the hell do I do with this, you know? And at that point, some people at the back started getting up to leave. And she said, you shouldn't leave because you are witnessing something very unusual. A senior Buddhist teacher is failing before your eyes because I have lost my mind. And then she proceeded to describe exactly what was happening in her thinking and in her emotions. And then she led us in a dance, Joanna Macy, the Elm dance from the Chernobyl region. And we got in the car, and I was mortified, you know. And we got in the car, and she said, see, I told you I can't do cold talks when I don't know the people. And I left her at the hotel. And the next morning I picked her up. And she was clear-headed and sharp as a tack. And she said, I didn't sleep last night. I gathered my parts together. I spent the night just like I did several other times in my life. I gathered my parts together. And then she led a day-long meditation retreat where she was absolutely crystal clear. Now it's that was part of her genius, part of her brilliance, that she understood the nature of the self partially by reconstructing herself. Quite an amazing, she was here. There was another teacher visiting from out of town at the time of the grand opening, actually. And this other teacher, said, Ruth is a very interesting package, because she had these parts that were so brilliant and sometimes she was quite off. Doug Pullen tells this story of himself. And Ruth was on one of the early retreats at Brighton Bush Hot Springs, where she came for years. And out of the blue, she walked up to him. She hadn't talked to him ever. And she walked up to him and tapped him on the shoulder and said, you need to love yourself more. Changed his life. It's like, which reminds me, unbeknownst to me, I thought all the retreats at Brighton Bush had been canceled. I have a retreat there, a 5-day residential retreat in June. Registration's not open for it yet, but you might, it's on the PIMC calendar now, I think. So you might be thinking about that. It'll be limited registration because of their accommodation issues. So, any other question, comment, please?
I was just curious, why did you want bone to be visible up there? Or why did you ask to make sure that was possible?
In the Satipatthana Sutra, there are various categories of practice. One is mindfulness of the body. And then that's broken out into mindfulness of breathing while aware of the whole body, mindfulness of action, of posture, sitting, standing, walking, lying down, mindfulness of the elements, earth, air, water, fire, which can be directly experienced, mindfulness of the 32 parts of the body. I have a great slideshow of this that I'll be showing in my class. And there's the classic 32 parts. There's many more parts than the list, but hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, and it goes on to blood, etc. And the practice is done by looking at it, reflecting on it, developing an image of it. And then the question arises, is this me? Am I this liver? Am I this heart? Am I this skin? Am I these bones? And this is very ill understood by most Westerners. And this is still practiced, or it was practiced. My teacher, Tangpulu Sayadaw in Burma, Myanmar now, when one of his monks died, he would be put out on a slab, and they would sit and watch his body decay for a month or two. A lot. Why would they do that? Now, these weren't beginners, and if the mind was moving toward disgust or terror or depression, then that's the wrong meditation. But the purpose of it is to break the fantasy, the delusion that we have about, number one, the attractiveness of these things, but also of their permanence. And so there's the 10 stages of decay, which are very much part of the mindfulness of the body practice. So it's so interesting watching what comes up in the mind. I was really Ruth's son. She, from one of the rapes, she developed a pregnancy in Germany in the prison camp, and it was an ectopic pregnancy. It was probably in one of the fallopian tubes. It almost killed her, but it meant she would also not be able to have children. And she was a kindergarten teacher. She loved children. And that's why she had so many of us, that we became her children. And so I got to be with her right to the end. She had this bad stroke, terrible stroke. And then I got to be one of 3 people who did all her personal care for the last 11 days as she died without food or water. And when it came time for her cremation, or before she had her stroke, we had gone to the funeral place, and also she wanted to see the crematorium where her body would be burned. And so we went, and when it was time, I was standing here, and here was the cardboard box, and then over there was a monk friend, Achan Pasano, and we got to push the box in. And then I got to push the 3 buttons, preheat, and blast. And so the contemplation of death is very much a part of Buddhist practice. If you were to go to Ubon Ratchathani, which is in northeastern Thailand, which used to be, was kind of like Appalachia, used to be really the boonies. When Achan Cha went there, and if you go to his monastery, it's a big place. The meditation hall is probably 6 times the size of this. It's a beautiful marble floor, and at the front on that side, there's a skeleton standing. And the story is there. It's the skeleton is and has a bullet hole in the head. And the story is that it was a woman who was very depressed and a very avid devotee and contributor to the monastery, to Ajahn Chah's monastery. And the family donated the skeleton as a teaching object. There was also there at the bottom a term, a baby that was stillborn in formaldehyde. So we can look at this and think, oh, how gross, how utterly. But I would suggest this: if you ever, the next time you have a chance to sit with a human body, don't miss the chance. Because there's a certain perspective of all the weird mysteries, right? Just think back a little bit. You won't remember, but you didn't exist. And then two human beings came together in a very weird way. And then chromosomes started exchanging, and then a baby developed. I mean, is that not bizarre? And consciousness came in somewhere, somehow. And then you were born. And you made it. You made it through. Everybody in this room actually made the big test. Can you go like this? And I've been present at 2 human births, the births of both of my children. And boy, everyone breathes a sigh of relief. It's like, yes, they're breathing. And then you went through somebody training for a long time, became somebody with all of your beliefs and the emotions you're allowed to have, and beliefs about yourself and the language and so on, the politics. And here we are. Until we're not. And we all know that we're not going to last forever. And it's a giant thing that's always walking with us. We don't like to talk about it. Even as I'm speaking now, it may be very uncomfortable for some of you. We don't like to talk about it, but it's the most important truth of our lives, actually, that we're all going to die. We're time limited. And if we can remember that, we treat each other and ourselves really differently. Right? My this, my that, my gated community, none of it belongs to us. There's a great little, all I could do is use the drum, Rumi, Sufi mystic, 11th century. Inside the great mystery that is, we never really own anything. So what is this strange competition we feel then? Before we go one at a time through the same gate. Inside the great mystery that is, we never really own anything. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? We never really own anything. So what is this strange competition we feel then before we go one at a time through the same gate? Two other little tidbits. In those months when I was there with Ruth, planning she was 94, planning what would happen after she died. She wanted to control everything, what we would eat, and we were sitting in the hall. It was a hall about 2/3 the size of this, where we had her ceremony. And there are, I believe, 5 videotapes on the RuthDennison.com site, which is the recording of that ceremony that was about 3 hours long. And it's really worth watching, powerful. But there we were before she died, sitting in a seat on the side. And I said, this is really a crappy setup, Ruth, because the next time I'm here, you will be up there in a coffin and I will be alone. And she said, well, that'll be a fine teaching on impermanence, won't it? It is. So having that little piece of Ruth Denison bone, it's a great contemplation. In fact, how many of you would like a little bit of Ruth Denison bone? Anybody? So let me, if you want some, I have, that little stoop up there, the plastic thing. I have some of them at home still, and I have some of her that we call it ash. Email me, robert@robertpeaty.com, and I'll give you some. I will. We in the West, we think, oh God, why would you want that? But it's a nice thing to have on your altar, I think. Is that enough?
I've been reflecting on how you mentioned Ruth was able to piece herself back together
Yes.
that night when she felt she was losing it. A few years ago, I read a book by David Darling called Zen Physics. And in this book, he talked about when we lose consciousness for any reason, whether it be sleep or anesthesia or anything like that, when we awake, scientifically, we're piecing ourselves back together through our memories. And it seems to be an unconscious process where we don't have much say as to how we piece ourselves back together, what stories we tell ourselves to be who we are today, which should be who we were yesterday, right? Do you have any insight how Ruth was able to kind of hijack that process and choose how she pieced herself back together instead of just going through that automatic subconscious piecing back together?
I think we need to be careful with how concretely we take those words, as though there were pieces and then she was pulling them back together, because it's a living process. And I think we're always pulling ourselves back together. You're sitting here and the mind wanders and you're thinking about the past, or you're worried about this or that. And then mindfulness arises and then one comes back to the breath. And this vagrant part, we could say, is now part of the whole again. I think that we're always doing that. And one of the central threads of the Satipatthana Sutra, actually, I can speak of it this way. I forget how many instructions there are in the Satipatthana Sutra, but after each one, there's a little paragraph called the refrain. And it repeats itself exactly the same. In publications, they pull it fully in and then they say refrain. They don't print it again every time. Or they begin it. And for decades, I didn't read the refrain. I read it once, and there's a book on mindfulness called by Bhikkhu Analayo, his PhD thesis actually. And he said that the refrain is the most important part of the whole document. And it's repeated because of its utter importance. So I went back and read it. And so let's say this. The meditator observes the breath. They notice in the original document, like a turner, like a person working at a lathe knows I'm making a long turn or I'm making a short turn. And so one notices whether the breath is long or short, deep, shallow, jerky. One really studies the nature of the breath. And then in the refrain, it says, a person cultivates sufficient mindfulness to observe origination factors and dissolution factors, and both origination and dissolution factors in the breath. What does that mean? It really means a person notices the beginning and the ending, and both the beginning and the ending of each breath. One notices the impermanence, speaking of the body and the parts. It's like that the breath, there's no such thing as a breath. By the middle of the breath, the beginning's gone. Nothing ever exists. It's always in change. And then there's more of the refrain, which says, and the meditator observes, in this case, the nature of breathing internally and externally, and both internally and externally. So one observes the breath coming and going in oneself, in the other, and in both. And then the last sentence is I find so relieving and exciting, because it says, or the meditator cultivates sufficient mindfulness to know there's breathing. That's all. So repeat it. And then it's like the second factor, the second foundation of mindfulness is feeling pleasant, unpleasant, and indeterminate nature of all phenomena, all experiences. The refrain is what turns it into insight meditation. Because we're not just slavish, we're not just trying to get concentrated on the breath because we want to contain the breath. We're actually using the breath as the teacher that nothing's lasting, right? There's no self in here. And not only is it not lasting here, it's not lasting in my dog either. I have a dog that comes with me to my broadcast shed, and she snores. And sometimes I throw things on her over the computer because she snores a bit too loudly. But sometimes I also, not during the broadcast, but I'll sit there and I'll listen to her breathing. She's old now. She's old. She's got a hip problem. She won't last long. But she can teach me, oh, things are, this truth of impermanence, this shining truth that there's nothing enduring, which from the position of the individual could sound, oh no, that's bad, nothing's enduring. But then as one deepens and one realizes, oh, that's interesting. There is this that knows nothing's enduring. What's that? So, in thinking of Ruth piecing herself back together, I think what happened for her was her mindfulness just had just dissipated. I have a personal experience of that. 3 years ago, I had a small stroke. At the hospital, they discovered an incidental finding, which was a large aneurysm, 6 by 7 millimeters on an artery under my brain. So this wonderful Vivek Deshmukh is the man, and his assistant, Karine Levins, spent 6 hours burrowing in through my forehead underneath my brain to put a titanium clamp on that artery, parallel to the artery. So I'm here today. It was fraying. The edge of that aneurysm was actually fraying. When I came back into consciousness, my experience with general anesthetic, and I've had a few surgeries, has been I come out and I'm Mr. Lovebug. I came out of that surgery in absolute psychotic terror. There's actually trauma still from it. Because it's like there was enough something to know I have to solve the problem. I have to figure this out, but I have no mindfulness. And it was just this terror. It's like I was out of control. And there was this terror in my chest, which actually persisted for a month or two. It got so hooked in there. And my wife, Jennifer, who's a veterinarian and a brilliant physician, she figured out it's the Keppra. After a surgery like that a brain, anything where they go near your brain, they put you on an anti-seizure medication. And she figured it out. And she had to fight with them because nobody has that reaction to Keppra. Keppras are pretty, they use it all the time. But I had 24 hours I had no center. There was consciousness, but no mindfulness. And it was terrifying. And then they got me off the Keppra. Phew, I was back. So that's one of the ways I make sense of Ruth's depersonalization, derealization. That was a bad state, man. How's that? I think of what was it like for Henry and Ruth to go to different. Henry had been a Sri Ramakrishna Swami before he met Ruth. He was older than her a fair bit. Sri Ramakrishna was a great saint teacher in Calcutta, Kolkata now, around the turn of the last century. Very famous, hundreds of thousands of followers. And Henry was a devotee of him. And so he knew, he also came from the Denison Railroad family. And historically, they owned much of the land between Palm Springs and San Diego. It was a very, very wealthy family. Henry was one of, I think, 25 or more descendants. And he had quite I think it was $6,000 a month or something. He had quite a large stipend. And they had, through him, they knew all these great teachers, so they had access to them. And so I just imagine, what was it like to be quite mentally ill, as Ruth was, traveling to see these different teachers, and can somebody help me? It must have been wild. And it was after that trip that they met U Ba Khin in Rangoon, and they decided to stay there and do some practice. And it was there that Ruth began having her opening. And U Ba Khin noticed, and he took an interest in her, and that was how she became a teacher. It was difficult for Henry that his wife was recognized as the teacher and he wasn't. That was a challenge in their marriage, actually. And when he died, his dementia got really bad. And Ruth took him with her to the desert, to the house they lived in where she died, and took care of him mostly single-handed for 2 or 3 years. It was quite something. Hope that's not more than you want to know. It feels good to me to speak of it because just because it's my mom. I have another mom too, my bio mom. Equally important. How are we doing? Oh God, it's almost done. Is there anything else anybody'd like to ask before we go? Please, way in the back, KB. You won't see her because she's hidden.
This is an observation, but perhaps you have some thoughts to match it. Something I've observed about myself in the past few months is that when my mind is not tuned in or aligned to my awareness, I tend to lean into a place of judgment of myself and others, and perhaps the circumstances floating around us. And it's an observation that can make me feel a little stuck or frustrated.
How wonderful and extraordinary and beautiful it is that you're becoming aware of that habit of the untrained mind, right? Judging, criticizing oneself, others. And that's the neurotic mind. Does anybody in the room relate to that? So the fact that there is enough mindfulness to become aware of it, then what we can do, and we commonly do, oh, there's something wrong with me, and why am I like this? And this is the stuff of Western psychotherapy, right? Articulating that and unearthing it. But then there's the step with mindfulness of we start noticing, oh, here's the trance state, and it's full of judgment, liking, disliking, comparing, liking, disliking, I, me, them. And then awareness comes on, and we notice, or it's noticed, that this is a thought process, has some emotion attached to, and that it's not personal, right? It's an object of awareness. And then we lift the needle. I don't know, less and less can one use this image, the vinyl, you lift the needle and put it somewhere else, another track, and that judgmental thing simply is gone because it's an old habit. And mindfulness and meditation will over time diminish and diminish and diminish that to the vanishing point. So the mind just simply stops doing that. Not because we stop it, because it just wears out, it runs out of conditioning, out of its gas. Is that making sense? So it's a great sign that you're suffering with that. And the more aware of it, the hotter the suffering can be. And then you can also really observe the part of the judging. It's like, you shouldn't be doing that, right? You should be better than that by now. And to watch that too. And then that too is, okay, thank you. Oh, last comment or question, and then we have to go.
I'd like just to add to that for me, being in the space between the thoughts is a good practice. Being in the space between the thoughts.
Yes.
Is a good place to be. And hopefully over time, there's more space between the thoughts, and using your heart, mind, you make better decisions and
Amen,
live your
brother.
life better.
Right on.
Yeah.
So thank you all for coming. Let's make a big circle and we'll do our closing. Come and let's come on up on the stage and we'll hold hands. Yo. If you don't want to hold hands because of COVID or something, you don't need to, just touch elbows or something. Come close, we'll pack, we have more people. People on there will see more of us. Please let us become aware of seeing. And then let your eyes travel around the circle. You may stumble upon a moment of eye contact. Something magic in that, isn't there? It's like boing. Consciousness meets consciousness. And maybe it's just one consciousness meeting itself. Thank you to those of you that joined us on Zoom. Let's close with that ancient chant from the Mangala Sutta, Bhavatu Sabe Mangalam, which means, may all beings receive all blessings. And then Sadhu, which means, may it be thus, or well done. Bhavatu Sabe Mangalam. Bhavatu Sabe Mangalam. Bhavatu Sabe Mangalam. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And now, the great test of permanence or impermanence. Is this circle permanent or impermanent? So please become aware of your hands. Really, really feel your hands. Maybe give a little squeeze to the person beside you. And then, is it possible to let go of each other? Let's see. Slowly, slowly. Wow. Once again, observing origination factors and dissolution factors in handhold. Thank you, dear friends. Please come and join us for a cup of tea, coffee, and conversation with some very fine persons.
Goodbye, online people.